Good day, everyone. My name is Fabian Calilao, and today I will presenting my discussion or my report in language comprehension with the focus of parsing. And let me give you an overview of the word parsing in our course psycholinguistics. So this is one of the most critical processes in our course psycholinguistics because it allows us to move from words to structure and meaning. So dealing with the structure, this is how the words, phrases are organized or put into a sentence to give its meaning. It could be a subject verb or object, a subject and verb, or subject verb follows by indirect object and direct object. So there are a lot of structures that we can put in a sentences, and that is and that includes in parsing. We study how the words move in a sentences or organize in a sentences, and with the use of the structures, and then we figure out the meaning of it. So like think of it this way, like if I say bark dogs bark loudly, you don't just hear the three words dogs bark loudly, but immediately there is a process in our brain that we recognize, that we organize them into a subject, verb, and adverb. So that's how parsing work. Now let's move on to our objectives for today's lecture. So define the parsing and its importance and comprehension, and construct and analyze structures, sentence structure, like in the semantic and syntactic, and appreciate the parsing role in communication and understanding. So, as we go along, I will show you some examples, or some are simple and some are tricky, to make sure that these outcomes are not just theoretical but also practical. So, now let's move on with the word parsing. The question is, what do we mean, or what is the meaning of parsing? So, in language comprehension, it is not just about recognizing words. So our brain organizes words into grammatical structures and builds meaningful relationships. So parsing is the mental process that makes it possible. So for example, here the hard work students pass the exam. So six words, and if we tend to hear those words, we don't just rely on the number of the words, yes, of course, but we try to identify the functions of the functions, or the structure of the sentences, how it is being put to each other, and we try to identify which is the subject, which is the verb, or the object, clarifying, giving us the clarification, who did what, who did the action, and so on. So now imagine if we only process hearing the hard work students pass the exam. Imagine if we just hear the word separately, like the with the fragments of student, exam, pass. So without knowing who did what, parsing prevents that confusion, diba? So once again, if we're going to just hear the words, um or the fragment students, exam, and pass, you wouldn't know exactly or understand what is the sentence all about. So now another example that I can give you is this one. Okay, so the little cat is in the house. Okay, the little cat is in the house. If we are going to broken down it into noun phrase and verb phrase, this three shows how parsing organizes words into grammatical structures. Okay, so now the question is, now that we figure out what is parsing and how do we do parsing, what is the importance of this? So parsing is vital because it helps us understand sentence meaning, organize words into meaningful structures, and resolves ambiguity. So when we say ambiguity, there confusion, giving us a multiple meanings. So it in because of parsing, it resolves the ambiguity. We can be able to choose which is the right context, or which is the right meaning on the context. So without parsing, communication would collapse into chaos. Like for example, flying the plane, or flying planes can be dangerous. Or it could uh it could have multiple meanings, like it's dangerous to fly planes, or is it, are planes that fly dangerous, 'di ba? So with parsing it helps us to decide which interpretation fits the context. Okay, now let's move on to the two types of parsing, which is the syntactic and semantics. Now, as you view, we have here syntactic parsing. Syntactic parsing focuses on the grammar and sentence structure. So, for instance, the students completed the subject yesterday. So, it parsed into, as you can see, subject, verb, and object, and the adverb. Okay, so another example, the cat chased the mouse. Okay, let's just give a simple example. The cat chased the mouse under the table. So here's parsing shows that under the table modifies the action. So not the mouse itself. So this distinction matters in teaching grammar and reading comprehension. So the importance of this parsing type of parsing is it clarifies relationship and improves our comprehension. Now dealing with the semantic parsing. What do we mean by semantic parsing? When we say semantic parsing, on the other hand, it focuses on the meaning of the sentence. Consider the sentence: professor saw the student with the telescope. Or we can say meaning that we can interpret in this sentence is this can mean either the professor used the telescope or the student had it. So which do you think is the correct which do you think is correct here? So semantic parsing use context to resolve such ambiguity. So here's another example. Visiting the chicken is ready to eat. So there also another multiple meanings for it. It could be the chicken is ready to eat its food, or it might be that the chicken itself is the food that is prepared or ready to be eaten by the person. It could be like that. And another is visiting relatives can be boring. So parsing helps us decide whether the relatives are visiting us, or are we the one visiting them? So that is how the parsings, our semantic parsing helps us to figure out which is the right interpretation. Now let's move on to the importance of semantic parsing. The first is it ensures accurate communication and crucial in AI and translation. Now let's go with the connection to speech perception. Okay, parsing bridges sounds, really recognitions and meaning constructions. When we hear speech sounds, the next that it undergoes is the brain identifies the words, organizes them into grammar, and apply context for meaning. So think about listening to someone speaks quickly, like if even if they say that she saw seashells by the seashore. So your brain doesn't just hear the sounds; it parses them into a meaningful tongue twister, and that's a real time comprehension. Okay. Now, in cognitive and neural mechanisms, parsing is supported by specific brain regions. So, when we do parsing, there are some parts of our brain that supports that doings or that job. So, working memory holds fragments of sentences for integration, and Broca's areas processes syntax, while Wernicke's areas handles meanings. So, for example, patients Broca's aphasia struggles with syntax. They might say, boy kick ball, instead of saying the boy kicked the ball. So meanwhile, patients with Wernicke's aphasia may produce grammatically correct sentences but lacking in meaning. So this shows how parsing depends on distinct but connected brain systems. So allow me to show you a diagram that shows Broca's area and Wernicke's area. So the green part here is where we can find the broadcast area, and the orange part here below the green is where find we can found the Wernicke's area. So broadcast area supports syntax and Wernicke's supports meaning. So together they make parsing possible. Now let's move on to the models of parsing. Two major models explain how parsing works. The first is in garden path theory. The brain prefer simple structure first, and the analysis occur when the initial interpretation fails. So, for example, the old man, the boats. Initially, at first, it misleads us until we reanalyze the concept of the sentence. Second, we have constraint-based parsing. This model suggests that parsing, meaning context and prior knowledge, are used simultaneously. For instance, when you hear the evidence examined by the lawyer was crucial, we don't just wait until the end. You use context clues immediately to parse it correctly. So that is constraint-based parsing. And And here are some garden path sentence. Let's go back with the first sentence of garden path theory. The old man, the boats, tricks us into misinterpreting until we reanalyze the sentence. Okay. Now let's move on to the challenges in parsing. So the challenges in parsing is first we have lexical ambiguity. When we say lexical ambiguity, like the word but it has its ambiguous meaning or multiple meanings, like but it could be a animal or it could be a sports equipment. Now next is structural ambiguity also complicates comprehension, as in I saw the man with a telescope. It could have a two multiple meanings. Next is the cross linguistic differences also matter in this in this matter of parsing. English follows subject verb object. It could have a lot of structures, and we also have the Filipino often follow verb subject object. Two things um, that we can construct for the Filipino sentence is that verb subject object or in an inverter manner. So like for example, in English, the teacher explains the lesson versus binasa ng estudyante ang aklat. So different structures but the same parsing processes. So now let's move on to the application. So parsing has wide applications. In language teaching, it helps the students to decode complex sentence. So those students that find difficulty in understanding the sentence, this parsing will help them. And in artificial intelligence, parsing powers machine translations like chatbots and grammar correction tools. And clinically, parsing supports therapy for aphasia, dyslexia, and comprehension disorders. So, for example, Google Translates relies on parsing algorithms to decide whether the word bank, BANK, is a financial institution or just the side of the river. So, without parsing, translation would be nonsense. Okay, so try to look at this one. So this is an example of artificial intelligence. And this one is explaining clinical view where patients with Broca's aphasia struggle with the syntax, and while those with the Wernicke's aphasia struggle with meaning. So parsing research informs therapy, therapy approaches. So to conclude our presentation, okay, parsing is more than just a linguistic tool. It is a bridge between sound and structure and meaning. This is the foundation of comprehension and the gateway to effective communication. So through syntactic and semantic parsing, the brain organizes language, resolves ambiguity, multiple meanings, and enables understanding. So parsing is the central uh, of psycholinguistics and education, artificial intelligence, and clinical study. So that is the end of my report. Thank you for listening.